All right, hey everybody, welcome to tonight's The Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. It's Greg LeBuff here with you. We have Coach Brad and Coach Dustin with me as well. And tonight's going to be a really cool conversation. I actually want to start it by asking a question. So I'm going to ask the question, and then we're going to jump to our intro. We'll be back in 60 seconds to answer this question. So here's my question. What if one-on-one never existed? What if one-on-one didn't exist? What if one-on-one fighting did not exist? Back in 60 seconds. Many people understand that they can at any time become the target of a violent criminal assault. These same people know that they have a life, family, and property worth defending. Criminals understand that violence is its own language. Violence is not the sport of competition. Violence is not the art of fighting. Violence is about one thing: destruction. There are those who believe that violence, even in self-defense, is morally wrong. Then there are good people like you who know that defending yourself, family, and others, as well as your property, is not only a personal right, but a duty within a civilized society. Understand, violent assaults are won before they occur. People who learn strategy survive. People who do not will not. For those brave people who believe life is precious and worth defending, welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Okay, all right, everybody, we are back. And again, welcome to the Education of a Weaponized podcast, Weaponized Man podcast. I asked a question. Here's what we're going to do. I asked a question before we cut to the intro, and the question was this, in case you're joining us late. What if one-on-one never existed? Right? What am I talking about? Obviously, just for 100% transparency. What if a one-on-one assault, one-on-one fight never existed, didn't exist? Okay? What would change if one-on-one didn't exist? I was thinking about this earlier today, right? I was just reflecting on a few different things that I was thinking about bringing to the table tonight. And then it just kind of hit me because we're always trying to come at the conversation of how you separate violence. What's the difference between violence and martial arts and even a reality-based martial arts? What's the difference? How does violence, because violence is a different entity. It's a different animal altogether. And it's not closely related. It's very, very different. There's a pretty big separation between violence and martial arts sport or even a reality-based fighting system. So then it kind of hit me. What if you just flip the script? What would the world be like? What would self-defense look like if one-on-one fighting never existed? Now, many people probably jump to, I know, so 2-on-2. It's 2-on-2 fights. No, not 2-on-2. 3-on-3, 4-on-4. I got you, right? No, stop. If one-on-one didn't exist, what I'm asking is what if it was always uneven? What if it was always 2-on-1, 3-on-1, 3-on-2? What if it was 5-on-3, 5-on-2, 5-on-1? And a lot of people sit there and go, and you know what's so funny right now? A lot of people go, oh yeah, like what realistically, like you're going to have 7 or 8 people on 4. Like the numbers always go up. You can have 3-on-4. It's still, the thing is, my point is it's broken, but here's the thing. Most people go, when we're saying 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-3, 5-on-3, whatever it is, a typical average family, 4 people in my family. If I get into a violent assault with my entire family there, it's 2-on-4, or it's 3-on-4, or it's 5-on-4, or it's 6-on-4, but is it really? No. Of course not. You know, a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, not that a 12-year-old can't have some defensive strategies and can't do, but most people, the thing I'm trying to break right off the bat is everybody automatically thinks 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. They picture athletes. They picture fighters.
Yeah, for sure.
I could have the superior numbers because there's 4. There's me, my wife, and my 2 kids. 4-on-1, 4-on-2. It's like, but I don't have the superior numbers. You have different vulnerabilities. Okay, so I don't want to stray too far off it, but let's give me a visceral response. What if one-on-one never existed?
You know, even for me, when you asked the question, it was like I could feel a conflict, not really a conflict, but just I knew exactly what you're asking, and I understand what you're asking, but my head went to exactly what you said, went to athletes. And I'm like, why is it going there? And I was trying to think, but it's like, this is what everybody fucking sees, right? They constantly see in television and let's call it entertainment, and in traditional martial arts, they see one-on-one fights, competitions, whatever that happens to be. So it's really hard for most people to break that kind of identifier of what a fight looks like. You know, even knowing that I know very well, like, because my first visual response is like, well, it doesn't exist. It doesn't really, like, one-on-one doesn't really exist. So I had that kind of battle because my head did go to those two places. First was like, it doesn't exist, and then another one was like, well, there's these everything that people see, and I think that that's one of those things that causes a paradigm or a challenge, because everybody constantly sees that. And you see videos too of traditional martial arts saying, well, we're going to work mass attack tonight. And it's really one-on-one with different people, like taking their turns, right? It's not really mass attack. It's one-on-one, you know? So even that, it's like the concept of violence being an assault versus training a traditional martial art where everybody just takes their turn to attack you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of where my head went in those two kind of directions.
Perfect. Okay, Dustin.
This isn't maybe an exact answer to your question, but I'll just tell you where my head went when you posed it to me. It was two totally different things. First one was just the other day I was driving to an appointment, middle of the day, downtown-ish, Edmonton, and I kind of just, I'm going down the street and I look over and I see these 5 young men all walking together, kind of taking up the whole sidewalk. And I mean, we study PINs, you know, for people, interpersonal communication, behavior, body language.
Yep.
I don't know what it was, but just something my intuition picked up, just their body language was in such a way. It just got me right away. I was like, damn, like that's 5 guys, probably around 20, all like good shape, you know, decent sized guys. I'm like, there's 5 of them. And right away my head was like, damn, I'm glad that we train the way we train. Because right away I was like, fucking 5-on-1. I'm like, that's going to be tough. I'm like, even with the right strategies, like you're going to have to work. You're going to be in one. You know what I mean? So just that's right away what I thought about, was because I had gone through that the other day. And I'm like, for us, that's just normal. That's how we train. We prepare for stuff like that. But I think it's so, what you're probably getting to, it's so polar opposite of what everybody else thinks of when they think of a fight, an assault, violence. Because like you said, it's one-on-one, it's 2-on-2, it's athletes. And so, yeah, just to have that diametrically opposed position, I think is such a powerful thing, which is probably something that we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, 100%.
And then the other thing that kind of hit me was, just as you were talking, I'm like, oh, what's an easy way to convey this to people, like what we're about to maybe talk about? And this is like just a fraction of it, but if you were to say to people, well, what if you had a hockey game, but one team was on a power play the entire game?
Yeah.
Right away, people are like, oh yeah, no, fuck, that like completely changes the game. It's like, yeah, and then
that's not fair.
Right, but it sort of fits in what you said too, but that's also like 4 high quality people against 5 high quality people. Like that's why I say it's only like a fraction of what you're getting at. Because again, it could be 4 and 5 athletic, strong, young people versus one maybe not so able-bodied individual or whatever. You get my point, but anyway, yeah, that's where my head went.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to pop this up here because we had Mac throw up an answer too, and he said that when I asked the question, I'm just going to repeat the question in case anybody missed it. But what if one-on-one fighting never existed? What if it didn't exist? There was no such thing as a one-on-one violent assault, a one-on-one attack, a one-on-one fight. There was no such thing. And Mac's answer said that he went to thinking of medieval fighting between small groups of soldiers/warriors, knights, the Greeks, Vikings, etc. And that's kind of where his head went first with this. Okay, so let's do this in somewhat of a systematic order, because for both of you guys, your visceral reactions and feelings and that you shared with us are going to play into part of the conversation in a little bit, right? So we'll tie that in a second, but let's start at ground zero with this scenario. One-on-one doesn't exist, okay? That means what? That means that anybody that wants to learn to defend themselves or fight automatically has to equate everything they do to more than one person. Well, what is like, and again, we could do an hour on this. What are some of the inherent problems when you have more than one person who has the ability, the capability, and the ability, that means not just the physical prowess, but the skill to harm, to attack, right? You got to understand that's not just punching and kicking. That's not just close quarter and ground. That is two sets of hands, two sets of feet, bodies, pressure. Like that is a whole different thing. So automatically when people start going, okay, well, if one-on-one never existed, we'd have to equate everything we do to multiple opponents. And one of the things that really floats to the surface for me, and this is partially based off experience, both real world as well as through training, but one of the things that I want people, I don't know where most people's head's going to go, but right away it's positioning. And I say now, if anyone's got any type of jiu-jitsu experience, they think, positioning, he's talking about ground positioning. No, I'm talking about angulation. I'm fighting off the geometric angles. Right? One of the first things that you figure out in mass attack, it's like, yeah, we got 2 people, 3 people. One of the most devastating thing that numbers allows them to do is to control the geometric angles, to control range and angles, right? Meaning someone can stand in front of me, someone could stand 90 degrees to me or 180 degrees to me. That's just 2 people, one in front, one behind. And as I move, they can move. Right? You just have someone in that triangle effect. Someone's to your left, someone's to your right. Then you add a third person to that. Now where do they go? And see, this is where, we often associate a term with violence, which is called the blitz. A blitz attack, imagine, everyone sees it. If you ever watch a football game and the quarterback snaps the ball and these big, massive fucking linebackers try to rush in there and destroy the quarterback, try to tackle the quarterback. Now, there's a couple things. One, he has a defensive line in front of him. He has his own big badass guys to try to slow them down, stop them completely, whatever it is. So imagine a quarterback with no defensive line. So now you just got the quarterback. Now, the second part of this is imagine the quarterback doesn't say hike, doesn't snap the ball. He's just standing there and the fucking other guys go whenever the fuck they want to go. And they can line up anywhere around him they want to line up around him. So in front of him or behind him, to the left of him, the right of him, or all of it. Like, I'm just trying, what I'm trying to do right off the bat is we're not even talking about punches and kicks and counters to chokes and body tackles and single legs or double legs and being picked up and slammed. Forget it fucking all, because back up and just recognize when you have to equate everything you do to multiple opponents, understand that violence occurs in a 3-dimensional environment. Meaning what? There's terrain change. There's gravel and grass, and there's elevation changes within that, and there's concrete, and there's ice, and there's snow, and there's all kinds of different shit. And there's tables and chairs and trees and cars and walls and doors and windows and all kinds of stuff. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is that you, in this environment, very seldom are you going to find yourself in clean lines like you do in a martial art or a combative sport. You know what I mean? So again, I'm talking, equate everything you do to more than one person, and right away, the angles that those people are going to be at. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we've all studied thousands of hours of CCTV footage. We've all had our own real world experiences with violence, but here's the thing with it. I have never seen a 2-on-1 where the first guy piggybacked the second guy. Yeah, get on my back and we'll get this fucker. Like, they're not lined up. They're not handcuffed together. They don't lock arms like a fucking do-si-do and square dancing and then go, let's get this guy. They blitz. They move. They blitz. It's a fluid mess.
I think naturally there's a propensity to want to circle. I mean, look at like a pack of wolves. I don't think too often you're going to see a pack of wolves attack in single file, right? Like, there's just a natural inclination to want to circle the prey.
Yes.
People are going to do the same thing.
Because people are vulnerable at their back.
Yes. Matter of fact, like, I don't want to go too far off on this, but just to address what you talked about, that's the human nature, right? Like a pack of wolves, any apex predator, they will, in their pack, they will not use violence within their own pack. They go through their posturing type rituals. Like a crab, right? Crabs have a little, if a crab fights another crab that's kind of part of its community, they'll use their pincers and try to flip the one. But, if it's kind of like a crab that's outside of its social ecosystem, it'll rip its fucking eye off. It'll try to rip its leg off. You know what I mean? And it's like, the point I'm getting at is their pack of wolves within their own pack will have a posturing thing to figure out who the alpha is. But when that pack of wolves is threatened by another pack of wolves outside of their pack, they'll fucking ambush them. And human beings are the same way. If you go back, I mean, human beings in violence over the years, like over the centuries, will attack. We don't, we ambush. It was only through some sort of moral socialization that, they tried to change that in modern warfare and have people line up and march into battle and fight with a sense of fairness. But that's not in the human nature. My tribe, if I had to protect my tribe, the human instinct is to fucking ambush. And if I can't ambush, I'm going to flee. I'm going to get the fuck out of there because I'm going to live to ambush another day. If they're trying to ambush me, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to get the fuck out of there and survive and, get the pack out. So let's not go too far off on that. But part of what we're talking about tonight connects to this humanness. If there was no one-on-one, you have to equate everything you do to multiple opponents, and right away the whole math formula has to change. Okay, so let me just throw a couple things out, then I want you guys to speak on it, right? So here's the thing. If one-on-one does not exist, never has, never will, okay, then think about how this statement changes, okay? And the quote is this: let's fucking go outside and fight, okay? Because everybody's heard this at some point. This is, for a lot of men, this has probably been a fear. For a lot of people, well, especially men, right? But it's like something happens, you're out, something happens, some guy is in your face fucking talking shit, and all of a sudden say, fuck you, let's roll up our sleeves, go, come on, you want to fucking go? Let's fucking go. So the quote that sums that up, that encapsulate that scenario is, you want to fucking go? Let's go outside and fucking fight. But if one-on-one doesn't exist, how does that statement change? Because if somebody's saying it to you and one-on-one doesn't exist, now there's the two of you. You two are out, and then there's just me, because one-on-one doesn't exist. So I see you two guys, but I'm pissed off, whatever, so I can say, fuck it, let's go outside and fight. I'm challenging the both of you. How many times is that going to happen? Right? Paul used to tell me all the time, Paperboy doesn't ring your doorbell and ask you to step the fuck outside. You know what I mean? People that look at you guys, wow, those guys probably really fucked me up. They beat the ever-loving shit. I mean, there's two of them. I think the one's got a knife. Fuck, the other guy might even have a gun. Well, this is going to be good. I'm going to challenge them to a fight. I'm going to mug those motherfuckers. That's what we call a high-value target, folks. No, it doesn't work that way. I would avoid you guys. I wouldn't challenge you guys. But flip the script. Two of you, one of me. Would you challenge, not challenge me, but would you attack me? Yeah.
Of course. So
that whole saying of let's go outside and fight. So if that changes, maybe speak to that. How does that resonate with you guys?
The first thing that kind of hits me is the terminology. The terminology has to change, and I think that the way that I envision it is that you can't call it a fight. Now, the only way, with a caveat to that, the only way that you may be able to call it a fight is if the two individuals are not really invested. Right? But once you have individuals that are invested in hurting you, injuring you, killing you, whatever that happens to be, is you can't call that a fight, and obviously, I don't want to, we could go and talk about consent and we've talked about that before, but just in terms of the perspective shift is I don't think that word is even valid at that point.
See, I totally get what you're saying. It's 100% true. But what's so interesting about this concept of if one-on-one never existed, it in fact would be called a fight. But the definition of the fight would be different, right? Yeah. And of course, what you're saying is we can't call it a fight by current standards because one-on-one exists, and this is what everybody thinks about. But that's what I mean. The why that's such an interesting concept is because again, our brain works in terms of symbols. We attach symbols to things. If I say cat, car, duck, whatever, everyone has a symbol for what they believe is a cat. So some picture a domestic cat, some people picture a fucking lion, some people, a Black Panther, I don't fucking know. But everybody's got a symbol for what cat means to them. That sometimes their symbol is, destroyed furniture, annoying meows. I don't know, whatever it is. Everyone's got a symbol. Right now, if you say the word fight, the symbol is so...
that's right.
prolific in our society that everybody automatically sees one-on-one. Everybody automatically sees the dueling, the symmetrical paradigm of the fight. And that's what we're trying to break by asking this question. You say fight, no, one-on-one doesn't exist. So when you say fight, what you're talking about is being outgunned and outmanned by people who are invested. Why else would they fucking fight you? They're invested. They're not harassing you. I never said they're fucking bullying you. They're again, now even the word, they want to fight you. But right away for a lot of people, shit changes. Because I said, listen, the phrase, let's go outside. You want to fucking go? Let's go outside. That whole thing changes. Because going outside means what? Well, there's two of them. And it means that there's no fucking honor anymore. And this is maybe a point that a lot of people would feel. If one-on-one doesn't exist, things are never going to be balanced, right? They're never going to be fair. One-on-one doesn't exist. And that's only one of the indicators for fair, one of the ingredients of what people would think needs to be fair. But if that doesn't exist and it's always 2-on-1 or 3-on-1, then what happens is there's no fucking honor anymore. Because people would automatically, well, who the fuck would do that? That's not fair. Like what kind of fucking people would do that? Like it's for some people, this is an unconscionable thought, right? So there's no honor. But if there's no honor, then there's also no rules, right? And if there's no rules, then it's like, you know what I mean? Like then you can't ever use the term fair ever, like, you know, and I think a lot of people bring the concept, the paradigm, the belief of fairness, of honor, of some sort of rules or some line in the sand, whether that's moral. Okay, remember physical. If you get into the octagon, there are physical rules. But there's also moral rules. Now, I don't imagine that in the UFC rules or in mixed martial arts, I don't imagine, now maybe they do, somewhere in their constitution of rules within that sport, do they have a section, whatever, that says no participant may bring in edged or impact weapons? You know what I mean? They probably don't have that. Now maybe they do, but they probably don't. So I'm saying there's physical rules. You cannot X, Y, and Z. Then there's moral rules. What if a mixed martial art fighter was desperate to win, goes in there, fights his heart out, realizes he's losing, so he has a knife tucked into his waistband or inside his glove, he pulls it out, and he goes back out in the next round, and he starts cutting, slashing, and stabbing the guy. You know, I don't think that's probably in the rule books, but he's broken a moral rule. But I'm trying to show the domino effect. If one-on-one never existed, and it's always going to be mismatched, uneven, there's no honor because now it's 2, 3 ambushing and trying to violently assault, murder, you know, one. There's no rules in that, so that means no physical rules and no moral rules. Right? So again, we're trying to paint this picture, and I'll just come back to what would change. How would the landscape change?
One quick point I want to throw in is you're talking about, fair. You're talking about what's fair, what isn't fair. And you said, the one-on-one is kind of a misconception, right? The idea of that. I think one other kind of misconception that's pre-conditioned into society that's worth addressing, not for us, we know this, but for other people watching, is when we talk about like 2-on-1, 3-on-1, I think there is a bit of a false belief that those 2 or those 3 will attack you in turn. And we sort of touched on it a little bit when we talked about circling people and stuff like that. But if you look like in movies, which of course where a lot of people's reference for fighting comes from, that's what you see. The John Wicks fight 8 people one at a time, and the other guys sit back and wait their turn. Yeah. And it's not realistic. So I just thought it was important to kind of point that out. When we say 2-on-1, 3-on-1, they're not taking turns. They're not waiting politely till you're ready for them.
Okay, I want to throw another statement out there because I just want people's response to this. But here's the thing, right? Whenever you talk about a violent situation, like we're putting this hypothetical forward that what if one-on-one doesn't exist? But here's what I want to tell you. When it comes to violence, the experiences that I've had personally that enter into the realm of asocial violence, not antisocial aggression, but asocial violence, meaning that you're devoid of choice, facing violent criminal predators, and the situations, the real world situations that the people that like my instructors, my mentors, that they faced. Again, the situations that are classified as asocial violence that entered into that realm have never been, not a one of them, have ever been one-on-one. One-on-one simply does not exist inside of that. I don't want to say vacuum, but inside of that realm. It doesn't exist, right? And why is that? Because in that situation, right, like you're talking about a situation where you have this whatever kicks it off, whether it's a spontaneous thing of people feeling offended, people, whatever the context is, somebody loses control, and it's a group of people. But when people become emotionally out of control, when they get a stressor, right? A lot of individuals that end up murdering somebody, even unintentionally or intentionally, oftentimes they can trace it back to a stressor. What set this person off? What set this devastating outcome? What set it off? What set it into motion? So when there's a stressor and people are emotionally out of control, okay, viscerally, when they get to that level of emotional instability for whatever the stressor is, whatever the catalyst is, they viscerally do what? They grab something. It's always two things. It's always multiple opponents, and they always grab something. It's always weapons. Like every single time. That's experience. That's what exists in there. In this realm of violence, which is what we're talking about, it's always mass attack, and there's always weapons. And that's what I want people to understand. So us asking this hypothetical question of what if one-on-one didn't exist, that is true in the realm of violence. Now, here's the thing, because I'll just separate this for contrast here. One-on-one does exist. One-on-one is part of this world. But I want people to understand something, right? One-on-one exists in what? In antisocial aggression and in sport fighting. That's where one-on-one exists. Now, one-on-one, antisocial, meaning that you have choice, right? Somebody's ego or sense of moral superiority, that guy can't talk to me that way, you looking at my girl, fuck you, this and that, the posturing, the da-da-da, and then the fight breaks out, and it's one-on-one. And then that fight escalates, and it turns into something violent, and somebody dies. And people say, oh no, that was asocial violence. No, that was antisocial aggression that escalated and ended up into the realm of violence. So yes, it can mutate and escalate up. So one-on-one can mutate up into this realm. But inside of this realm, at its core, it's like the atmosphere, like you're going to a different planet. Asocial violence is different than antisocial aggression. Asocial violence has its own atmosphere. And so antisocial aggression, if it mutates, can enter into that atmosphere. But asocial violence by criminal predators starts there. It lives there. It's constantly there. It doesn't mutate into that. It is there. And in that environment, in that ecosystem, one-on-one does not exist. Now, somebody could argue and say, oh, I can show you 3 or 4 times where a violent predator criminal with intent was one person and mutilated, murdered, sexually assaulted another person. Was there a weapon involved? Probably. But you're right, it was one-on-one. That would be the exception in that environment, not the rule. Just like a fight, antisocial aggression, when you have choice, can mutate into a violent situation. It's the exception, not the rule. You know how many people get into fights that don't end up in homicide? That don't end up with somebody dead? Thousands of them do. Arguments that don't end up with somebody dead. Arguments, thousands and thousands of arguments and conflict and confrontation where not even a single punch is thrown. Thousands of them. But what we're talking about is what is the rule, not the exception to the rule. And the core rule is that in that environment, I remember my instructors telling me about a 4-year period where they were in Virginia training the U.S. SEAL teams. And for 4 years, they trained and they went into this part of town, which is after a certain time is illegal for civilians to go into this part of town because a whole fucking SWAT platoon have to go in there after certain hours. So it's actually a crime to enter into this town. And that's where they'd go all the time. And they'd go to this bar. And this bar was full of nefarious individuals, right? You didn't have a lot of Mormons preaching the good word in this part of town. Let's put it this way. And so every day what would happen is fights would break out. And now I say the term fight, but what it was some badass people, bikers, killers, badass people. And whenever shit went down, was always mass attack and always involved weapons. And he said for a 4-year period, it was like it's visceral. When shit kicked off, didn't matter who started, how it started. When shit kicked off in that type of toxic environment, people viscerally grabbed something. And my experience in my assault and in violence, mass attack and weapons. Being bottled in the face fucking how many times? Trying to break the bottle into my fucking eye. You know what I mean? Like mass attack and weapons. So one-on-one doesn't exist in this world. And so it changes things. And I'll say it this way too. If you find yourself in the one-on-one antisocial fight, you should easily be able to handle that situation with your jiu-jitsu and a little bit of Thai boxing. Right? If it happens one-on-one, you need to move back a little bit and understand how to move from some punches, maybe throw a quick punch, maybe a Thai kick, maybe a teep kick to push him back. Boom, body tackle, take him down, jiu-jitsu, and you should be able to roll. You can, in a one-on-one situation, in 99.9% of the situations, the scenarios that you might face, you can probably remove yourself. If you don't get your ego and a moral sense of superiority doesn't take over, if you regulate yourself, you can just walk away from that. You can de-escalate, deter, or remove yourself. And if not, you do not need what we are talking about. You do not need the asymmetrical tactics and strategies. You can just use the conventional stuff. Take them down with your jiu-jitsu and a little bit of Thai boxing. And I think that we so often are trying to get people to come into this ecosystem of violence because today, listen, in this world, welcome to our world, folks. That's what this conversation is about. Wake up. Inside of this ecosystem, one-on-one does not exist. Mass attack and weapons, that's what you're going to, and this is going to lead us to another point I want to make tonight, but that's the ecosystem. Figure this out. If you come into this with any belief that you're going to find yourself in a one-on-one with no weapons type situation, you're in the wrong ecosystem. Go back to antisocial aggression, go back to fighting, go back to competing, and get a little bit of Thai boxing and some jiu-jitsu, and you should easily be able to do that with symmetrical strategies. You don't need the type of firepower we're talking about. You don't need the type of strategies and the plan that we're talking about. Now, if that mutates up into the ecosystem of violence, you may need a few extra strategies. But even off that, if you are pulled into that attacked by people that exist in that ecosystem, you need something completely different. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it makes me think of examples when, someone gets into whatever type of situation and it evolves and it mutates and all buddies jump in and kind of swarm this guy and blitz this guy and they end up in mass attack. And it's like, at the end, when you hear them come out on the other side of that, it's like, I totally got jumped by these guys. And it's like, but they talk about it like it was a fucking surprise and it wasn't even on their radar. They're like, yeah, it started here. And then all of a sudden I know all his fucking buddies jumped on me and were kicking me and punching me and whatever, stabbing me, whatever it happens to be. And it's like, but it was always that. You were just so singularly focused and thinking that, and it wasn't even on your radar because it was never part of your survivable strategies, and it's always such a fucking surprise. I got jumped or I got sucker punched. It's like, that's not, those are false statements in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a not understanding the separation between the different ecosystems, right? Yeah. So 100%. Dustin, you want to throw something in there?
Nope, nope.
Okay, then let me jump into this next thing, and I'm trying to figure out a better way to word this. So my wording's not going to be perfect, but as I explain it, hopefully you'll understand my context in with which I'm talking about this. But we started off by just going, what if one-on-one never existed? And I thought that was just an interesting way to go. What if it didn't exist? Then take everything that you think you know about fighting and martial arts and training, and then all of a sudden go, fucking one-on-one doesn't exist. You go, shit, now I got to equate everything I do against 2 or more people. And what you see right away is that your symmetrical strategies for fighting and stuff, they fucking go out the window. Okay? Now, the second half of this, I'm going to make a statement. Not a question, but a statement. And the statement is not going to be 100% accurate, but I want you to get the context. Okay. It has, and since the UFC came into existence, the one thing that the world has finally accepted is that there are 4 ranges of combat. Now, people may say, oh, there's always been 4 ranges of combat. There's actually 7 ranges. Anyways, we're not going to get into that tonight. But back in the day, people, you did kicking art, you did a punching art, maybe you did a kicking and punching art, and then, or you did a close quarter art like a judo or Wing Chun, and then maybe you did a ground, and judo could lead to the ground, and you did certain jiu-jitsu things that had takedowns and stuff, but very few people cross-train, and then UFC hit, and the world starts going, you got to kick, punch, you got to clinch, and you got to ground fight, and MMA is the greatest, they're the greatest fighters in the world because they fight in all ranges, and a boxer, I don't care how good he is, would get his ass kicked by someone in mixed martial arts because the second they close the gap, put them on their back, they're fucked. And it's true, right? But here's what I want you to say. Inside of our ecosystem, okay? So the ecosystem of violence, now come out of that. Go into the ecosystem of fighting. Go into where one-on-one exists. In the ecosystem of one-on-one, there are 4 ranges of fighting. In the ecosystem of violence, there are not 4 ranges of fighting. There is 1 range of fighting. Now, here's where my statement is somewhat false. What I mean by that is this. In the ecosystem of antisocial aggression, fighting one-on-one, as a fighter, you can change range. You can stay out and punch and kick. And that guy can shoot in on your kick and take you to the clinch. He can pick you up and slam you on your back. He could then go to jiu-jitsu. You could get out and escape off the ground, pop back up, and go all the way back out to kicking range, and the fight continues. Fighters, whether this is, they're pissed off and they're fighting in the street or they're fighting in the ring, can change 4 ranges, right? We're changing. Kicking, punching, clinching, ground, back and forth. In the ecosystem of violence, I think of it, and what I want people to get is it's 1 range of perpetuity. This is what people have to understand. 1 range of perpetuity. What does perpetuity mean? Perpetuity means it never ends. 1 range, what I'm saying is that, let's go back to what we said before. Viscerally, when shit fucking goes bad in violence, there's mass attack with weapons. If you think for a second that you're changing range, like you do against one-on-one, you're fucked. You are standing up, and then you're fucking on your back, and then you're up against a fucking wall in a clinch, and then you're fucking back on the ground. And then you got a bottle in your hand, you got a knife in your hand, you got a stick in your hand, you got 3 guys beating on your ground, they're picking you up and shoving your head in the toilet, they're throwing you out a fucking window. Ranges in violence are accordion, like they're moving in and out like an accordion in perpetuity. You know what I mean? Like, if 3 guys blitz me, how long, and I'm staying out here, here's my game plan, to stay out in long range, and I, punch and kick, and, he comes into clinch, and I work my counters. How long does that last? Because full circle this shit. I'm dealing with one guy and keeping him out in long range, you working my kicking range, and all of a sudden I get blitzed from the side. Who changed range? What I'm driving at is this. Probably the single most dynamic quality that a human being needs to survive in the ecosystem of violence is the ability to flow. Now, one-on-one, they'll say flow, smooth transitions from my punch straight into my body tackle. Right? Guy tries to tackle, right into my sprawl. and then boom, pull them into a knee, push right back out, keep it standing up. Yes, that is a flow for sure. Great transitions, athleticism, there's a flow in that. But do you see the difference between that and the ecosystem of violence? When the second you're trying to push a guy off from you, or he's driving in and he's in the clinch and you're trying to get space back to access your knife. A cop's trying to pedal back to access his gun, and boom, he gets tackled from the side. And then boom, somebody bottles him in the back of the fucking head. So now not only he's on the ground on his stomach. And then somebody grabs him by the back of the shirt, is pulling him up as he's fucking feeding him uppercuts, and another guy's kicking him in the back of the fucking head trying to push him back down. You get what I mean? Like, it's range is happening in perpetuity. The changing of range is happening in perpetuity, forever. It is constant and ongoing. My experience in violence, when you face multiple opponents who are trying to bottle you, beat you, stomp you, and hit you, is there was no one range. There was no kicking to clinching, to ground, to punching, to clinching. Do you get what I mean? Like, you can sit there and watch a fight and watch the transitions happening. No matter how quick and smooth the shoot in is, you watch this, the guy shoots in and takes him down. And you sit there and go, wow, that was amazing. But in violence, yet it's mutating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always say that, violence is chaotic, right? And who's going to survive? It's whoever can bring order to the chaos. And one of the ways you bring order is transitions, like you just said. The ability to transition and handle the mutations as they happen. That's how you start to bring order to that chaos, right?
Now, before Brad jumps in and before you go any further than that, this is what I want people to understand. You have to adapt. You're doing something and you say, oh, that's the transition's how you survive. But you got to remember, what got you from stand-up onto the ground? Like, you understand that, like, again, in a cage, in a ring, and you're standing up and you're like, I want to stay standing, and the guy gets a nice hook on my leg and sweeps me, and down I go to my back. I didn't want that to happen. But that transition is way more manageable and definable because of the context of the situation. But in the violent ecosystem, when you're being blitzed and I want to stay standing up, but all of a sudden a chair, a curb, ice, a blitz from somebody already had a hold of his shirt and was pulling, like, the transitions onto that ground, like in the cage and in the ring, when a guy grabs me and I'm countering and he hooks the foot and we go to the ground, even with the ones that catch you by surprise, I land in a pretty good position. Typically. Why? You watch MMA guys, one guy takes him down 9 out of 10 times, even like the odd time you see the guy's not ready, picked up, slammed on his head or something like that. That's the exception. Most guys, they transition and they already got him in half guard. They already got the frame in the face. Why?
Because they're transitioning through ranges, but it's not chaos. Do you know what I mean? You just said it. It's organized. It's planned. They both already know. They've both consented. We're going to kick. We're going to punch. We're going to trap. We're going to ground fight. So if I grab you and hook your leg, it's for one reason. Because I'm going to transition us to the ground. Yeah, okay, I knew that. Perfect. That's not chaotic.
Let me just throw this in, then Brad go. They're fighting with the 4 ranges.
Yeah.
And everybody knows. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, and we've used this word when we talk about violence all the time, and I think it's fitting to just kind of put it out here, and it's the difference. It's destruction, right? It's absolute destruction. And then you guys talked about how it's like, well, they're fighting with ranges, but it's like they're kind of working they're trying to get the guy in the ring. They're trying to beat him. They're trying to win. They're trying to score points, all that type of shit, whatever it fucking happens to be. But nobody's trying, like, it's not destruction. Like, that's a huge different context that you find yourself in when you actually just attach that word to the situation. It's like they're trying to destroy you by any means possible. Mm-hmm. That could be close to you, that could be far away from you, like whatever. Do you know what I mean? Depending on if they have weapons or all those sorts of things, it could be it's that's why like I like how you said it. It's just non-stopping.
Yeah. You see how, imagine this for a second. Again, just trying to clear, like the different, and this is why I said my statement of like, there's only one range of fighting and violence, because the one range is all of the ranges. That's why I said in perpetuity. Because a guy grabs me, and starts driving me because he wants to push me into the wall, right? And he's pushing me back, and his other buddy who's on the side of him is running, firing punches at my face. So this guy's pushing me, and the other guy's hitting me. And so one-on-one, he's pushing me. I can work counters and frames. I can try to get my base out. I can try to sidestep. I can try to get leverage on his head, on his arm. I can do lots of different things. So we're fighting in the range. He's grabbed me and pushing me. I'm fighting in the clinch range. We call it trapping. They call it clinching. But the second that he's pushing and I'm trying to fight in the clinch range, I'm trying to fight with ranges. I was taught you got to fight in all ranges. So I can punch, I can kick, I can clinch, and I can ground. I'm trying to fight in the clinch range, but this guy's punching me. And it's like, what? Hold on for a fucking second. I can't fight in punching range while I'm simultaneously fighting in clinch range. You know, I can't do that, guys. But the problem is the third guy is over here and I'm feeling this. And then I realize, oh, fuck, that's a knife. Oh, that's what that hot liquid is running down my side into my leg. I don't feel the pain, I just feel this. So now, do I fight in clinch range? Do I fight in punching range? Do I, like, when he throws his punch, do I parry it? Do I slip my head? Do I bob and weave? Oh, yeah, he's pushing me. Oh, fuck, he's stabbing me. So, or do I reach over, now I reach over and I grab the knife. What fucking range am I in? Because the guy that's stabbing me has his one arm around my waist, so he's holding on the far side of my waist and he's pulling me into it. We're in ground. We're in a tight clinch, basically stand-up grappling. Like, all of a sudden, it's like, fuck, I'm in 3 different ranges here. Because the changing of range happens in perpetuity. And if your training does not address that, you go, I've never had to do that. Have you guys had to do that? Have you guys ever had a fight, mass attack, where the ranges are constantly changing in perpetuity? Yeah, absolutely. All the fucking time, because that's how we do it. That's why the what we use for punching range isn't bobbing and weaving like a boxer would. It's not slipping punches. It's not padding and parrying. Not that couldn't come out at a certain point, but that's not our strategies. That's why, like the clinch range, the frames that you might use in the MMA ring to tie him up and to defend so that he can't get a sudden knee in, can't get a sudden elbow or spinning elbow, or he can't hook my foot easily to take me ground, or he can't body tackle in. You get what I mean? Like, there's lots of great technical things that do that, but we don't use them. Why? Because we're not fighting. We don't have the luxury of fighting with 4 ranges of combat. You have to survive in one fucked up range of combat, which is constantly changing through all the ranges of combat in perpetuity. So I don't have a thing to say like there's not 4 ranges. Well, there is 4 ranges, but really there's actually 7 ranges because somebody can be standing back shooting at you at the same time. And that's projectile range. That's not a kicking range. That's not a punching range. That's a projectile range. And so for people that go like, there's not 7, there's different ranges of combat when you're talking about the ecosystem of violence. That's why, again, there's clinching, and then there's something between clinching and stand-up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to get too deep into that tonight. But that's why, because you got multiple ranges happening at the same time. You say, well, you're painting an unwinnable picture. No, I'm painting a picture to which most people do not have the strategies to build a kill chain or a response chain for how to dramatically increase your odds of not just surviving, but thriving in that type of environment. And that's different than what the other ecosystem is. And this is why I said, if one-on-one never existed, you would come to the strategies, tactics, and tools that we use, because these things that we've talked about tonight would change, one in which would be range. And you would not fight in ranges. What's that?
I said it's necessity.
100%.
Because there's just not, well, what else are you going to do? Just fucking stand there and, like, you're dead.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think the way we're framing it tonight too, it's almost like the different ranges are more of like a tool. It's kind of like you can't have a favorite range, or what's the best range for defending your life. Like, is it punching range or is it ground fighting? Like, what's the best range? It's the same as saying, well, what's the best tool? I don't know. Like, what's the context?
Yep.
Right? You know?
Yeah, it's the thing again where people are like, and people will say this, right? And I 100% agree. Yeah, but the picture you're painting of the ecosystem where one-on-one doesn't exist and it's mass attack and it's weapons and these guys are blitzing, one guy's clinching, the other guy's punching, the third guy's grabbing and stabbing, you're fucked. There is no art. There is no art. There is no sport. There's no art. There's no combatives that work in that situation. None. Zero. 100% agree. Thank you. Thank you. That's why we are talking strategies. Strategies work. Strategies first, then tactics, then the tools, not the other way around. You need a strategy, right? You got in that scenario like that, people sit there and say they got to work the technique. What technique circumvents the clinch? Well, what techniques and tools circumvent the punch or the stab? But you need a strategy. A strategy when someone's clinching you and you have local perception and you see the other two guys and your brain is telling you, I already know that guy's got a fucking knife. Why? Because you're conditioned to look at the palm of the hands. I already fucking know he has a knife because I'm picking everything up. All three people, all the environment, all the situation. I'm using peripheral acuity and I've been trained to track all of that. Fighters aren't trained to track all that. Fighters are trained to focus in on the person in front of them. You know what I mean? Imagine being an air traffic controller and literally focusing only on one plane. Go work at LAX and focus in on one fucking plane.
It's not going to end well.
It's not going to fucking end well at all. And people think, oh, this is crazy. Have you ever played a fucking sport? You think on the football field, the quarterback has to only watch the one receiver? He doesn't have to learn to use peripheral acuity and local perception or vision where he can pick up the whole fucking field and dodge attacks and see plays developing and pick his moments and then still throw the ball. And you know what I mean? Like, there are so many examples. This is why we use driving all the time. When we drive, we don't focus in on one thing. You'd be in an accident every day, you'd be fucking dead. Yet we do it, but somehow when it comes to violence, because one-on-one exists and one-on-one is popular. And the scenario of the antisocial aggression, the one-on-one scenario of the fight, the altercation, the disagreement, right? That is what happens the majority of the time. Which is why you have choice. You have to, you can remove de-escalator deter. Like 99.9% of the time, you can just get out of that. So long as your ego and your sense of moral superiority doesn't pull you into something. And this is what is important about this type of conversation, because right now you should get people going, this feeling of like, fuck, what are the strategies I need to know? Like, it's a whole training methodology for how you flow. And that's why in that situation, the ability to, in one moment, while you're all of a sudden being fucking blitzed and you're on the ground, a bite. Understanding how to find that moment of time, the uninterrupted opportunity to fucking bite. Or that broken bottle and knowing where to cut on the human body or how to injure. But that bite gets you back up. You know what I mean? That stab with the bottle or that accessing your knife, that allows you to move and get back out to a long range. And then all of a sudden, you're on the ground and grabbing a rock and smashing somebody in the head with the shrimp, with the whatever. But it's the strategy always first. The linear lockdown, understanding angulation and how to line people up and the local perception and reading the pins. And I mean, we could just go on and on with that. But all of a sudden now, you're not trained to fight with ranges of combat. You're trained to flow in perpetuity. Meaning, I don't give a fuck. Stand up, on the ground, clinched up. There's no fucking hesitation, and it's not like in a ring, and it's spinning, and it's multiple, and it's mass attack. In 1 minute, you're doing something to the guy in the clinch, to the other guy throwing the punches. What's the strategy that circumvents that? And it's tough to paint the picture for people to understand, well, how do you even begin to train people this way? Because the way you train is the way you fight. And so you have to train and equate everything to mass attack. Everything is equated to mass attack and weapons. Everything. One-on-one with no weapons does not exist. The only time that ever exists is when we work secondary tools. Secondary tools, and most of that is learning your verbal tactics, your de-escalation tactics, learning to regulate your ego and regulate your sense of moral superiority, regulate your sense of self and self-importance, because those are the first things that allow you to remove, de-escalate, and deter. And then, yes, you can learn. Again, you have the symmetrical strategies. I mean, I have a concept where, this will be the last story, I guess, but I want people to understand, right? Like, we get the difference between the situations that I'm talking about that require asymmetrical strategies. We're talking about the ecosystem of violence, because I've had multiple attackers with weapons try to murder me. I get that. I've been there. I've experienced that. But I've also experienced a situation where I'm home with my daughter, who's 2 years old, 1 year and a half old, and I'm holding her, and her mom's at work, and I have the windows open. It's a hot day, and we're playing, and I'm carrying her, and I hear a bunch of yelling in my back alley. And so I go outside, and I got her, and I'm like, well, fuck, I can't leave her in the house. And I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, well, I go out, and I'm kind of like, I want to know what's, so I kind of move, and then I'm hearing it, and then it sounds like it's the police. And I go, and I walk into the alley, and there's two police officers. One officer, the male officer, is on the ground fighting with a suspect. And he's not doing well. He's losing. The female officer is trying to work her radio. You can see her SNS is up. And she doesn't know whether to pull her gun, pull the taser. She's not sure. She's trying to get for backup. She's not sure how to help them. And I'm standing there watching this guy losing, this police officer losing. And so finally I just walked to the female officer, hold my daughter for a second. And then because I have jujitsu, because I've trained in jujitsu since the early 90s, all I did was go over there, grab him, put a knee in him, control his head, hold his arm. The cop comes out from underneath him, gets up, flip him over. He puts handcuffs on him, and the whole thing is done. Take my daughter back, say, thank you, walk away. Antisocial aggression. And again, had that guy got up and was thrown at the officer, moving around, what's he going to do? Move around, hit him in the face, body tackle, push him down. Probably didn't even have to hit him in the face because just body tackled him. And so we call those secondaries. I didn't learn those secondary tools first. I learned those second.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Because when I was almost murdered, and I remember I'd done kickboxing, but when I was almost murdered, I was like, thanks, but no thanks. I had instructors who were like, no, you don't rise your expectation. You fall to your level of training. The level of training we're preparing for is the ecosystem of violence. You've already been there once. You willing to roll the dice the second time that you live in an attempted murder type situation? It's like, fuck that shit. All right, then we're going to show you the asymmetrical tools, the strategies, the tactics, the tools. We're going to give you a whole different type of fucking firepower and train you to not fight with ranges, but to fight in all of the ranges in perpetuity as they change and mutate, and it's ugly and it's chaos and it's anarchy. How do you bring order to that anarchy? And then as that skill develops, it's much easier to scale back and go, well, I can do this to you, but I don't have to do this. I don't have to pull this. I don't have to do all this stuff to you. I can just do this, control it, and we're okay. Okay, so anyways, circling back. What if one-on-one never existed? When you train for violence, one-on-one does not exist. Equate everything you do to mass attack and weapons. Multiple opponents armed with weapons. Never accept anything else. Do that, and you will figure out the strategies, tactics, and tools. Right? It'll take you years to probably figure it out. You're going to have a very tough time finding resources of people that understand that. Or just take our 90-day virtual intensive, and in 90 days, we'll show you how to do it all. 90 days. We'll solve this problem for you. Okay? And then, the second thing is the understanding of range. So, I don't know. Anything from you guys? Any final thoughts on this?
Just real quick, I really like the question. right? The question is, like, I know you said it's a huge perspective shift, and if you really take a second and think about it and answer it honestly, it changes everything for you.
100%.
Like, no matter who you are, if you're a fighter, if you're a martial artist, and you said legit, like, if there is a way that somebody could be like unbiased and honest with themselves, be like, well, what the like, yeah, like, it's gonna, you have to come up with an answer, and what you've been doing probably isn't it. No offense to anybody.
Well, again, it's for a very specific thing, right? So, I mean, you know,
Of course.
someone's training you to be an auto mechanic, and then, you know, they all of a sudden enter you in a downhill ski race. You know what I mean? Like, it's not offensive. Like, you shouldn't be good. You've never done this. Like, you fix a car, but you can't ski downhill. Like, it's two totally different fucking things. And people see punching, kicking, clinching ground, and they think if you use any of that at all, if it even remotely looks like that, then it's connected to violence. And it's like, no, just because there's a partial aesthetic that you can go, I recognize something that also exists over here, the strategies, the context with which it's done, the mindset, the attributes that you need, all of that are completely fucking different things. That's why like, we're not fighters. I can't just take 27 years of training and go jump into an octagon or a ring with somebody that is a trained fighter. Not even a professional fighter, just a good trained fighter who's been trained. The rules, I'm not going to fare very well because, and I'm not talking like, oh, what we do is so deadly you can't do that on people. No, the timing, the tools, the strategies, how you do that stuff is completely different. I know because I did that stuff before, so I know what it's like. And I know that, you know, when you stop doing that stuff, you're not good at that stuff. When you stop downhill skiing, you're not as good at downhill skiing. But I had to go to automotives. You know, you get the analogy, something that's so different, right? But the one thing, Brad, you just said real quick about, I remember in the beginning, because I came from the martial arts and the competition sports side of it, I came from that in the beginning. And when I met my instructors after I was in that assault, attempted murder, then I remember often asking Paul, because Paul would be like, hey, we're doing this, or my Tom, Ron, whoever would be doing this. And I'd say, what about doing this? And I'd always put forth my, hey, what about this? I learned this before. I'm pretty good at this. I used to do this when I fought guys. What about this? And he would always go, and he would always have it written on the board. Look over there. What does that say, Greg? Equate everything you do to mass attack and people with weapons. Oh. So he goes, go ahead and try that. Dave and John. Okay, John, why don't you grab a stick? Dave, why don't you grab a knife? And blitz. And they would just rush me. And I would try to do this. And then guess what would happen? And he'd be like, no, you can figure out your own answers. If you could make that work, I'm not going to tell you can't do that shit, so go ahead. What I just witnessed, though, that didn't seem to work. And you're like, no, you are an astute man. That did, in fact, not work. And you has your blood. And I remember he used to come over, had a giant cut down my head one time from, hey, why don't I try this? But absolutely, you should try that. And then he walked over and said, well, that's why God created first aid kits. And I'm like, I think I probably need stitches. He's like, a couple Band-Aids on that thing. We'll get some carbs at lunch and you'll feel just great. Okay? And, mine, it went from, what about this? To then I tried to be smarter and said, why can't I do this? Hoping that he'd give me some sort of an answer first. And it was always still, let's try it. And I said, no. I'll just take some time and figure things out. But eventually that line of questioning and thinking stopped because it just went, equate everything that you do to multiple opponents with weapons. And then I just realized none of my strategies and tactics and tools and my fighting arts weren't equated for that. They weren't built for that. And so I had to learn the asymmetrical strategies, tactics, and tools. Okay, so. Okay, Dustin, sorry, I kind of cut you off, buddy. Anything you want to hit on final?
Just kind of the same as what Brad was touching on. I think one of the challenges changing people's perception, right? I mean, that's why we're here every week having these conversations, is trying to get people's perception to shift. Because once it does, that's literally all it takes. It's kind of like that's the so-called seeing the light or opening the door. And so hopefully this explanation or this way of looking at things, framing things, that one-on-one doesn't exist. Hopefully that was a good way to shift people's perception on what violence is and how it's not a fight. So, I mean, that's what worked for me a long time ago. You talked about coming from martial arts. I did too. My exposure to this initially was a demo that you did. And this is literally the concept that you sold it to me on. You know, you didn't use the terminology, one-on-one doesn't exist, but it was all about mass attack weapons. Because I'm sitting there going, oh, what the hell? Like, I never thought of that. Because I was trained and believed that one-on-one, fair fight, all that stuff, right? So, you know, we've been doing the same thing for a very, very long time. This is just a slightly different way of explaining it, but the core concept, the immutable concept, is exactly the same.
Yeah, it's 100%. And I'll just say something for people too, like, nobody knows this until they know this. Like there's two things that happen when people are exposed to this. One is their ego because they've been training, or their ego because they had a plan of what they think they would do, and this destroys that. Like, the reality is, oh fuck, I felt that way before. Everything that I was doing, everything that I was good at, I was an amazing, you know, I could all like, the second you equated to multiple opponents with weapons, that's some of the dumbest shit you could ever do in your life. And it was like, oh, right? So I get that. But at the end of the day, it's fucking exciting as shit. Like, when you start learning this stuff, because as you can imagine, the strategy, what you have to do has to be so simple. And it has to be, it's cunning. You have to be fucking cunning. That's the greatest attribute. You have to be taught to think this way, right? And I'll end it with this again. You don't rise to expectation, you fall to your level of training. Too many people often, when I talk about this, say, yeah, if you're just got the right mindset and you're willing to fucking be ruthless with people, that's all you need. No, there's no such thing as tough anymore. It's trained and untrained. You're either weaponized or you're unweaponized. And what we're talking about is how to increase the odds. There's people untrained, unweaponized, that survive violent encounters. Absolutely, 100%. And that's good. But it's like, is it accidental if not incidental? You know what I mean? Like, I wanted the certainty that I know for me, for my family, for my loved ones, shit's going to turn out fucking good because I've been training, working, and preparing. That's the way that firefighters don't just go, I don't give a fuck, I'll run into that fire. I will fucking run into that fire and I will save people. So long as you got the right mindset, they fucking train, they prepare, they train some more, they use the right equipment, they train some fucking more, and they show up fucking battle ready because they don't want to just survive. They want to fucking thrive in those situations. You're a life-saving force in a dark, critical moment. Who is the life-saving force for your family's darkest, most critical moments? Right? It's time to fucking weaponize. Rise regardless, right? And on that note, we have a 90-day virtual intensive we just launched. So in 90 days, we can change the fucking game for you guys. Just head to our website, scroll down to the coaching. Just watch at the end. It'll lead you there, and you can check it out. We're going to do a couple upcoming podcasts on the 90-day virtual intensive so that people can get familiar with what this is. But we launched it just a little while ago, and it's the latest, greatest, and it's awesome. So anyways, that is it. Anything? You guys are good?
Good.
Fantastic. Hey, guys, thank you so much, Dustin, Brad. I really appreciate you guys, the time. Mac and everybody else that jumped on tonight, and Shane and everybody. I just always love it when you guys comment and contribute, and we just so deeply appreciate any and all support. So that is it, everybody, for tonight. Please stay safe, stay weaponized. We will chat again soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotectar.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotectar.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my Freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotectar.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.